Good evening. My name is Pablo Balcazar. I'm a sophomore from Valparaiso, Indiana, studying sociology and political science here at Purdue's Liberal Arts College. Today we're going to be diving into the future of work with Emmy Award-winning journalist and media innovator Carlos Watson. He will be joined later by a trio of liberal arts young alumni who followed their passions to become entrepreneurs in addressing three very different problems. I'd like to take a second to welcome several students in the audience who have committed to complete their degree in 3 years. I think they're sitting over here. These students are driven, motivated, and focused. What a great proof point these students will have as they enter the workforce and their careers. As college students, we are preparing for the workplace of the future. New technology is constantly causing the workplace to evolve and forcing workers to adapt. 10 years from now, many of us will be holding jobs that don't exist today. So how do we get ready for this change? By envisioning employers' future needs, developing skills, and always learning new ways to create value in the workplace. That's something that tonight's speaker has a lot of experience doing because he has done it in his own career. Prior to founding OZY Media, Carlos Watson earned his undergraduate degree in government from Harvard, followed by a law degree from Stanford. In high school and in college, he wrote stories for his hometown Miami Herald and the Detroit Free Press. He worked in politics, business, and helped found Achievia College Prep Service, which prepared high school students for college and was sold in 2002 to Kaplan. He made his mark as an Emmy Award-winning journalist, hosting news programs on CNN, MSNBC, and now Third Rail with OZY on PBS. At OZY, which he helped launch in 2013, Carlos has developed a multi-platform media operation whose approach to delivering the news helps its mostly younger audience understand where the world is heading. OZY's offerings include news, podcast, and the Presidential Daily Brief, which provides readers and listeners with a bite-sized rundown of each day's must-know news. Last fall, Carlos began hosting Third Rail with OZY, a Friday night panel discussion show on PBS that creates conversations about provocative, sometimes taboo subject matter. Among the first season's guests were Amber Rose, Linda Sarsour, Malcolm Gladwell, and Purdue's own associate professor of English and author, Roxanne Gay. If anyone could speak to the range of possibilities for today's young people, it's Carlos. So please join me in welcoming, for tonight's talk and our Q&A, our special guest, Carlos Watson.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
West Lafayette's a little quiet today. Good afternoon. I am so excited to be here. I love this topic. I love the idea that more and more people are getting a chance to create companies, and especially people who, like me, started out as liberal arts majors and maybe weren't really sure that they were going to get that chance. I like a little woo early. That's good. That's good. I wanted to tell you a little bit today about my journey, but maybe unlike what you're used to, rather than just tell you about some of the things that have gone well, if you don't mind, I wanted to actually share with you some of the biggest mistakes I feel like I've made. And so I hope that's okay. So I think a number of you may know that a few years ago, I wanted to start OZY because I felt like media was important and how we get our news or how we learn about culture ideas was important. But I felt a lot of what was out there was honestly a little boring. I felt like a lot of times at a variety of places, they would just take the same headlines and just repeat them over and over again. And they might put breaking news next to it, but it's not breaking news. And I thought, can't there be something more vibrant, more colorful, more global in its aspirations, something that wasn't just about what's happening today, but maybe the most interesting things that are coming tomorrow, whether tomorrow is literally tomorrow or 6, 12, 18 months away. And so I partnered with a terrific guy named Samir Rao, and we set out to build what someone described as the love child of Vice and The Economist. And by that, they meant that we wanted to be smart and global and forward-looking, but we hoped that we would always do it with a sense of style and some verve. And that was really important to us. And over the last 4 years, OZY's grown a lot bigger and a lot faster than we thought. Today, we reach about 40 million people every month, slightly more women than men. About a quarter of the folks are outside of the U.S. I hope that'll continue to grow. We not only reach people online, but we've got 3 television shows, we've got really interesting podcasts, a festival that I'm proud of, and a lot of hard work has gone into that, and I'm proud of a lot that we did and a lot that I hope that we did well. But as I said, I wanted to maybe spend less time telling you about some of the things that I hope that we did right, and if you guys don't mind me sharing today, I wanted to tell you about some of the things that if I had to do it all over again, I would do differently. All right, so we're a year into OZY, and we're no longer in the coffee shop in Silicon Valley. We now have our own office. It's up and going. It surprises us every day. It's growing and going, and before you know it, we not only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million people a month, but all of a sudden one of the biggest media companies in the world comes and knocks on our door and says, I think what you're doing is so cool that even though you're only asking for $5 million, I want to invest $20 million in you. Has that ever happened to you? It hadn't happened to me before either. That's pretty good. No one ever, especially my dad, no one ever gave you more money than you were asking for. And so it was a wonderful moment. We were super excited. And so to kind of celebrate this new investment, we told our investors that we were going to launch a new version of the site. And that even though a lot of sites at the time would take 3, 4, 5, 6 years before they really did a big changeover, we were going to make a changeover after our first year. And we were so confident in it, we said that we're calling this OZY 3.0. We said we were going to skip 2.0, right? That we were just so good, we were just going to zoom past it to 3.0. And so we got ready for the big day. The investors from Europe wired the money. And we said, great, we're going to turn it on live now. Wait, now. Wait, now. Guys, if you've ever seen anybody fall on their face, if you've ever seen a launch of something just completely botch, servers melt down, the site almost incomprehensible, your traffic literally go, you know how they have the charts where it charts your traffic? Literally go from there to there, kind of like one of those hard beepers. That's what happened to us. And over the next 2 years, we really lost the faith. You could imagine if someone gives you a lot of money and then literally the first thing that happens is it doesn't work. They're not going to feel good about that, right? That really impacted our relationship with our largest investors and with our newest investors. And it's funny, I now sit back and think about how that happened and how we went about making such a grave error. And I realized that we, weren't good planners. We thought we were good planners, but we weren't. We kind of planned only at a surface level. We planned in a way that assumed that, like, I'm going to do A, then I'm going to do B, then I'm going to do C, then I'm going to do D. But what happens if A doesn't work and you never have time to get to B, and you don't have time to get to C and D? And what happens if you don't know enough about what you're doing that you don't just need to do A through D, you need to do A through J, but you're not smart enough to know it because you're running around talking about OZY 3.0, right? And you're not asking yourself, what do I not know? And you're not asking people who are critical of you to actually be the first one to review things and not just people who like what you're doing already. And so it was guys, it was a very humbling, a very difficult experience. What made it worse, and I don't know if this has ever happened to any of you guys before, but it was so painful for everybody involved that nobody was honest about it. That even though the site wasn't working, even though we could see that our traffic literally had been cut by 90%, guess what my head of technology, my head of product kept telling me? Nothing's wrong. It would literally be like you standing in a house and like water's pouring through the roof and someone's like, oh, no, everything's good. Like, I'm wet. You know what I mean? Like, everything's not good. Like, and that was another interesting lesson for me about what happens to most of us when things don't go our way. It is, it's tough to be our best selves when things aren't going your way and when you've worked hard for something and you've hoped for something. And I realized that part of the issue and part of what I should have done better as a leader is I think I should have more definitively said that I messed up. I should have more definitively, clearly said, guys, I messed up. I need everybody to help me figure out how we get to a different and better place. I think if I had done that, I would have given everybody the room to be not scared, but actually to be more honest about what was wrong. And I think people would have rallied to help fix that. And it wasn't that I didn't want to do that, but I think, weirdly enough, I just wasn't thoughtful enough about it. And so that was a first big lesson for me about how to really plan and how to plan what I call humbly, right? Because there's a way to plan in which you assume everything's going to work out because you're a hardworking person, you're a thoughtful person. And then there's a way to plan that says that neither I nor anybody knows everything, and that even the most thoughtful, hardworking people can have things go wrong. And so maybe I need to be a little more thorough, a little more paranoid. Maybe I need to not ask how well is it going, but what's going wrong and what should we be worried about. And I should have done that earlier and more often, and so I didn't. And then the next piece of it, as you heard me say earlier, was I had to think about what kind of leader people need in a moment of crisis. I met a really interesting guy a few years ago named John Donahoe, who was the CEO of eBay. And he said something really interesting. He said, Carlos, he says, when I think about leadership, he was the CEO of a large company with thousands of people who work for him. He said, I think the most important people are the people who touch our customers every day. And everyone else, including me, the CEO, is there to support the people who are doing the hardest work, which is trying to make sure that our customers are happy and that they're thrilled. And it was a really interesting way to kind of think about it. Not a pyramid, but almost a reverse pyramid, right? And some of you probably have heard that in various forms, but I thought it was really profound and was really a helpful way to think. And so that was one of my big lessons, and one of the things that if I had to do it all over again, I would have done differently. The second thing that happened, and some of these happened together, is after we got off to a good start, like everyone, I wanted to try and hire some of the best people. And even though I had been fortunate enough to work at CNN and CNBC and MSNBC and other places, I still knew that for lots of people and lots of investors and others, the more people with big name credentials I hired, that would give them more confidence. And while sometimes that works and that works perfectly, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes that's not the right move for that person. And so I made a big move to hire two people who had really big resumes. But in the end, it turned out that neither really worked out well, because both had been fortunate enough to be a part of really large, successful organizations where they often had more people in their own group than we had in the whole company, right? And where, for the most part, it was kind of Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And even though in the interview process I talked about the fact that that's not the way startups, and especially ambitious startups, are, that they are 7-day-a-week affairs, and that's not just something you write, that's something that's real, I made a mistake and grabbed for something thinking that I would impress investors or impress other people I hope to hire. And I looked past some gnawing problems that could have told me that these people weren't the right people, or at least not the right people for us. Doesn't mean they were bad people, but they weren't the right people for us. What do I mean? I mean that one of the guys who I hired, after we'd gone through a bunch of negotiation for 6 months, hired him, flown him out from New York. He came to look around, find a place to live, etc. He called me on his way to the airport and said, can I come by? And he came back and he said, I'm panicked. I think this is too small. I don't think I should do it. I think I should quit. Oprah's got a wonderful thing that she, I think, took from Maya Angelou, the writer. She said, when people tell you who they are, believe it. I should have believed him. I should have said, you know you better than me. And you know what? Doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make us a bad company. But, I should have believed him. And so I would tell you a second thing is that even though I've hired probably over 1,000 people in my life, I think. I would tell you I still made a kind of fundamental mistake and not really asking myself carefully enough, was this a good fit for everybody? And that was a really interesting question, and that I was thinking too much about maybe impressing investors or impressing others by getting people with certain kind of serious credentials. And so I think that ended up being a little bit of a hard thing. I would tell you a third thing, and I won't spend all night telling you about all the mistakes I made, but I will tell you a couple only because I hope they're helpful. And I feel like we all hear enough stories of Elon Musk and all the others where everything seems to work out well. And my guess, at least sometimes when I've been in your shoes, is it's actually helpful to hear the rest of the story a little bit. And so I hope some of this is at least a little bit helpful. One of the hardest things I find when you're running a company and you're working 7 days a week and you're taking red eyes and you're trying to figure out how to make sure you can make payroll and you're not taking pay for a year and you're skipping birthdays and Valentines and all sorts of things. Or, my dad, 80-something, and he would come and hang out with me. I'm junior, so I'm Carlos Watson Jr., and he would come supposedly to hang out with me, but he would notice that I wasn't really hanging out. I was just working. So what would he do? He would walk over to Chipotle, he would grab me Chipotle, and he would just put it in front of me and just watch me. And so that's a lot of the unglamorous piece that happens a little bit. And so I say all this as background in that when you're busy and you have a lot of things going on and inside you're never feeling as confident as maybe it looks to some people on the outside. You're always feeling like you're just trying to hold everything together. Sometimes when you're faced with a difficult situation, the easiest thing to do is to push it down the road, is to not let someone go or not confront someone about bad or inappropriate behavior or to not raise an issue about how someone's spending. And, early on, we did that a couple of times where we just kind of hoped if we let this play out by a couple more weeks, or if we just waited because it was right around the holidays, or now we can't do it right now because that could impact someone else. You know what? I would tell you that one of the big lessons is that, not in every case, but in 80% of the cases, whenever not good stuff is happening, there's way more damage that's happening than you see on the surface. Meaning that person who's not a really good fit is quietly turning off 2 or 3 other people on your team. Meaning that person who's not a good fit is, even though they're telling you that they are doing X, Y, and Z key tasks, they're actually not doing them, or they're not doing them well, and you're gonna have to redo them all. And so one of the things that I belatedly came to find out is that as hard as it is sometimes, that if there's a difficult situation that has to do with a bill or with a sale that won't close or with a hire that's not going the way you want, that you've got to deal with it in the moment. And you have to deal with it in the best way you can. Now, I've learned, don't do it on Friday afternoons, Carlos Watson. Because on Friday afternoons, Carlos Watson is exhausted. And on Friday afternoons, he may not be as patient, and he may not explain things as well as he would on Thursday afternoon or Monday morning. So just because I'm saying deal with difficult things head on doesn't mean do them when you know it's not going to go well. And so I would say that's a third lesson that I learned. Last but not least, I would tell you in terms of the things that if I had to do it all over again, I would do differently. And when I'm saying this, by the way, I do feel like there are a number of things, again, at OZY that we have done well, and I'm proud of them, that we've done well. I think we have the right ambition. I think we were fortunate to put together the right group of investors. I think we were smart to give everyone stock, not just some people. I think that's changed the way people think about it. I think we are very open and transparent about our plan, so every potential hire gets to see the same business plan that we give to investors, because we say they're making a decision on us as much as we're making a decision on them. We, I think, have built a culture where we tell people, I would rather you be right 3 out of 10 times than 1 out of 1. Rather you be right 3 out of 10 times, so be right 3 times, be wrong 7, than be right 1 for 1. Because I want you to be bold. I want you to take some chances. that those 3 big wins, those 3 home runs, are worth more than someone's conservative safe 1-for-1. That doesn't work in absolutely every situation, but in general, I think that's been a philosophy that's allowed a lot of creative people in our company to probably take more chances than they would have if they were still at NBC, or if they were still at the New York Times, or if they were still at CNN, or if they were still at GQ, or if they were still at NPR or somewhere else. And so I think that's really important. So I think a lot of that has been good, and I'm really proud. I'm really proud that we've done that. But the last thing I will tell you is that in my first company, I started an education company a number of years ago, and it wasn't until the end of the company that I realized how important a really terrific finance person is. And even though that's not the sexiest role, having a little extra money to do smart things can make the whole difference between whether your company becomes a success or not. And the finance person is often, as quiet as she or he may be, is often the key person in that. And so I often said that one of my biggest lessons at my first company is that I would have hired a terrific finance person much earlier. I would say at this company, one of the interesting things is the importance of HR, or the importance of people and culture. That these days, startup sounds sexy to absolutely everyone. But the reality is actually joining a startup is a lot of hard work, as you're going to hear from three Purdue alums in just a moment. And it can be uncertain, and it can be tougher than most people expect. And so you really do need a good HR team to help you not only find the right people, but then often to help them figure out how to thrive, not just survive, but how to thrive in that environment. And so again, that's not always the first hire or one of the key hires that people tell you matters. People will tell you this engineer will matter, or this UX designer will matter, or this salesperson will matter. And I'm not saying that they don't at all, but I'm saying that finding the right person who can help you find the most talented people and then help those people be their best selves can make all the difference in the company. And the lack of that person can really hobble a young company and cause it to quietly grow at probably half the rate, or maybe even a quarter of the rate. I'm now going to finish, before I take a few questions, by sharing a few things that aren't good or bad, but that have surprised me along the way. I have been surprised. I used to believe, I think in part because my mom and dad were, and I am too, that extroverts were the best hires. I didn't say it out loud that way, but kind of in my mind, the more bubbly and alive someone was, I kind of associated that with that they were going to thrive and be more effective. Guess who some of my best hires and some of my best sales hires have ever been? Introverts. So that's been a little bit of a Freakonomics counterintuitive thing. That may just turn out that Susan Cain, the author of Quiet, is right, that introverts rule the world, or at least should. So be open to different kinds of talent. Second thing I'll tell you is that I often tell people, how many of you feel like you have a mentor? A few of you. There's something even better out there than mentors. How many of you have an angel? Anyone know the difference between a mentor and an angel? A mentor will help you when you ask them for it. An angel will help you even when you don't even know that you need help. It can be the most amazing thing. I always tell people, if you can, surround yourself with angels. And sometimes an angel is not who you expect. An angel may be younger than you. Angel may have a different political view than you. An angel may not even be a close friend, and you may not even be sure why that person's so helpful. Most helpful angel in my life is a wonderful woman named Chris Boskin. And I met Chris years ago when I first was going into television. And I don't know why, but I just had one of those feelings that said, call Chris, when I was first thinking about it. And I hadn't been on the phone with Chris for 5 minutes when she said, okay, I got it. Hang on a second. She hung up, she called me back. 10 minutes later, Chris had an agent for me. Over the years, I don't know why Chris has been that helpful, but I always say to Chris and her husband, I say, I hope you know that I am trying to pay this forward 1,000,000 times. And again, if someone had told you based on our political views, if someone had told you based on our ages, if someone had told you based on a whole series of things, that's not who you would have immediately assumed would be my angel. But I will tell you, if you get a chance, don't just get a mentor, get an angel, and be open to the fact that your angel may not look exactly like you think she or he may look, that they may surprise you a little bit. Last thing for all of you who are thinking about entrepreneurship, if there's one thing that I often encourage people who want to be entrepreneurs to do, it's to write a really good business plan. And they go, oh, so I can raise money? I said, nope. I said, it's for you. I said, putting your thoughts together in an organized fashion in one place will make you not think about all the issues, because even the best business plan is only 30% right? Life changes, the world changes, new competitors, new prices, all sorts of things happen. But it will force you to think it through in a more complete way, and it will give you a much better chance of being successful. And so if you haven't ever bought a book or read something online about how to write a business plan, do yourself a favor, whether you're an English major, whether you're a Spanish major, environmental studies, you name it, but write a business plan for something. Doesn't have to be long. Might be one page. Yours might have bullet points. Someone else's may have paragraphs. Someone else's, they may draw it, right? That's how they may do theirs. But write yourself a business plan. Think about something that you really care about, that you'd really love to see come true, and then give yourself it as a little bit of a project. You will find that it'll help you immeasurably, not just in that project, but in being a more complete thinker and a better executor going forward. Why don't I leave it there for now? I can see the hands waving, and I know I'm supposed to take a few questions, so I will pause there, and if anyone has a question, I'd be happy to answer.
You mentioned having mentors.
Yeah.
I have one that, ironically enough, is really similar to yours in the background. You both went to Stanford.
Yeah.
He also went into consulting after he studied at Stanford, and he also started a company which is academically based, I guess, more towards high school and kind of more technological than what you worked on. But I was an entrepreneurship major originally, and I switched all over majors in my prior institution, and I just transferred over, and now I'm a philosophy major. As of recently, entrepreneur ideas are I'm kind of working on them, but he has always emphasized that I should finish up school in the sense of master's, PhD, before I even pursue anything. In your opinion, how do you determine when's the responsible time to kind of pursue those ideas? Should you just work on them and eventually finish up, for example, school for me and then pursue them? Or is it more like a time-based thing, that if it's in the now, if it would work now, you would pursue it now?
Wow, I love that. What's your name? Jose, I love that question. And that's a tough one, to tell you the truth. Years ago, I got in a huge argument with my dad because I said that this thing called buffalo wings were gonna be big. That was way before they were big, people. I said buffalo wings were gonna be big, and my dad was like, nah. I was like, yeah. He's like, nah. And we went back and forth, and I didn't step on it, Jose. And I always tell Dad, I said, Dad, we could have been the Wing Kings. Like, we could have done this thing, right? And so it's tricky. I don't know that there's a perfect answer. I know that I started my first company in part because I was just thinking about it all the time. I was working at a consulting firm, and as hard as I was working and as tired I was working, I was doing research on the side, I was reading stuff, I was setting up focus groups, I was figuring things out, I was looking for space to rent. Like, I was enjoying it, right? Like, it was joyful, and it was just, I felt like it was kind of leaping out of me. And so I would want that to be true. Like, am I the son of teachers? And so is there a part of me that hears your mentor saying, at least finish a degree? There is. Do I know for sure that you should go all the way for a PhD? I don't know for sure. But I am a believer that you can learn things and apply them in different places. In fact, I think one of OZY's, I talked to you guys about a lot of things I felt like we've done wrong, but one of the things we've done right at OZY is we've been very open to different skill sets. Not only have we hired people from classic places, call it the New York Times or CNN, maybe even alternative places, maybe a GQ and Vice and other places, but we've Some of our best hires, our sports reporter was a freelancer for us, but his full-time job was as a controller for a chain of restaurants in New Jersey. But he was writing his ass off, if I may say so. He was, as a technical term, he was just a terrific writer, and we just felt it, and we took a chance on him, and he's been terrific. Another person was a board lawyer who just wanted to come join us and has ended up he always says he writes for his daughter. He writes so that even his daughter will find it interesting, and therefore everybody finds it interesting because his daughter's 6. And so, I think that people from all sorts of talent backgrounds can do it. And so maybe going to get a master's and PhD, maybe it will help you in a variety of ways, whether it's with connections, whether it's with confidence, whether it's with organizational skills, whether it's with presentation skills, whether it's with a specific idea in a specific area. So I hope you'll know, and you may not know perfectly, but I hope you'll know enough. I hope you'll know enough. The way I finally decided, the thing that pushed me over, just so you get to hear it, is my favorite professor, George Crawford, in graduate school, came over. I told him that I was leaving to go start a company, and he was so upset that I was leaving what was a well-paying job and a tough job at the time to get, that he came over to my job at lunchtime to try and talk me out of it. And he went through all the horrible things that could happen and blah, blah, blah. And after he did it all and kind of took his best shot, I still wanted to do it. I thought, I probably should try and do this. Because, I kind of still want to do it. So I don't know that there's a perfect way to know. But if you do decide to go for it, I wish you well. Wish you well. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Desiree, or Des. So when you have a deeply embedded dream, sometimes you have tunnel vision. So I know that you talked about in retrospect, the ways that you've overcome, or things that you would have done differently. But do you have any suggestions of ways or things that you did during that time, when you were first starting off, of how you overcame? You talked about the first group of people who kind of invested in your vision, but you didn't do so high, at least in your own eyes. What were some ways that you kind of overcame that?
Yeah, great question. I think my grandmother, who was born in Jackson, Mississippi, she was the daughter of former slaves, and she used to always tell me, "Keep on keeping on," and I think that one of the things that's important is sometimes we beat ourselves up because there's a little perfectionism in us, and I think the important thing is to both be honest about the mistakes you're making, but also know that sun's still going to come up tomorrow, right? And it's still a fresh opportunity to make things better and do things different. And so I'd say, Des, one of the things that I feel like my partner and I did well is that even when we messed up, we didn't just sulk about that. We asked ourselves, okay, how do we do something equally as strong, or at least get back on the path to goodness? And a lot of times we had to help each other with that. Sometimes one person was struggling more than the other, and I think that became a really important part of it. I think by being open to ideas from different people, some of OZY's best ideas haven't just come from my co-founder and me. They've come from a young woman, Libby Coleman, who was right out of college, or they may come from a young fella, Nick Foriezos, who was also right out of college, or they may come from a young woman who's still in college, Eva Rodriguez. And they've come up with all sorts of good ideas, from our first podcast to our first big year-long series to a different kind of meme that we're now doing on blockchain. If you haven't seen it, WTF blockchain, it's really good. And so I think that's been helpful too, being open to hearing from different people. The last thing that I'm going to tell you works for me and may not work for everyone. You know what is terrific for me is a whiteboard. You ever work with a whiteboard before? I'm one of those people where if I can see it out there, I can somehow deal with it better, even if it's a problem. You know what I mean? If I can kind of draw it a little bit and write it, and then over here kind of think about how I can fix it and do that, it kind of helps me. Whereas if it's just on a piece of paper, it kind of feels small. And I don't feel like my thinking can expand. And so not everyone's like that. Some people, you know, need different things. But I'll tell you, for me, we got stuck early on with the business plan. And I went with my mom, and we went to Office Depot, and we bought a whiteboard. And that made all the difference. We put the whiteboard up, and she'd poke her head in, and she was very funny. She'd say, I don't know what's going on. I was like, you were just sitting here 15 minutes ago. What do you mean you don't know what's going on? Of course you know what's going on. But that was her way of saying, like, we making any progress. And so maybe that may be a little piece of it too. So.
Hi, I'm Annalie, and you have given a lot of really good advice to like circumvent challenges or deal with challenges, everything from like have a great finance person to plan humbly. But I think that sometimes like we as college students or millennials, whatever you want to call us, are told that we don't have like a lot of grit. We're not very tough. I don't think that's true, but I was wondering like how do you stay tough? How do you face that fear when you're dealing with really big challenges like with the story you told at the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a big part of the way I do it actually is by asking other people about challenges they've gone through. And so for whatever reason, it gives me confidence in knowing that other people have gotten through things. And so it makes me think through it. I also, this may sound weird, but I'm a sports fan, big sports fan. And so even though I'm not necessarily a New England Patriots fan, seeing players like Tom Brady last year, not this year, come back from being down 28-3 and like never giving up and never saying surrender and go has made me think about that a lot. The other thing was and sometimes people get upset with me for saying this, but I keep in mind that a lot of the world goes to bed a little bit hungry every night. And so I think a lot about, even in my worst times, I try and contextualize that a little bit and try and understand that, you know, even though things may not be exactly the way I want in the relative scheme of things, they're a lot better. And a lot of times that dramatically lessens the stress, or at least puts it in a different bucket. Doesn't mean you're not stressed, but at least puts it in a different bucket. And so I think a lot about that, and I find that sometimes can help with that too. And then my partner sometimes just says, you're not that important. And then that happens too. Okay, I can see they're giving me the hook. And so we're gonna move on to the next piece of the discussion tonight. And I'm really excited to welcome three fantastic, or even fandastic, new word, Boilermakers. Molly Longest, who started the Lala, come on up. Grab a seat. Amy O'Shea, founder of Bright Books, come on up. And then the New York City native, Ryan Ma, founder of The Owl, co-founder of The Owl. All right, I'm gonna go sit over here, a little jacket free. And we're gonna have a little conversation about what they started and what they've learned. And so I always love to start. How many of you know Molly, Amy, or Ryan? A few of you guys do. So I always love to start by asking people for a little bit of a 60-second bio. And so, Molly, where are you from? How did you come to Purdue? And how did you end up becoming an entrepreneur?
Awesome. Hi, I'm Molly. I am originally from Carmel, Indiana, so grew up just north of Indianapolis. And I came to Purdue. My mom and dad both went to Purdue. I had an older sister there. I have an younger sister here now. They're both here. Woo. So I say I was a little bit brainwashed into going to Purdue. I tried to go to IU. I just couldn't do it. I ended up communication major. After switching a few times, I really couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I had an interest in a lot of things, but felt that communication was flexible enough for me to make it my own. And I ended up doing what I'm doing today almost by accident. My sophomore year at Purdue, which is about 2010, my best friend and I both thought we wanted to work for magazines because every rom-com at the time told us that's what we should do as communication majors. And we wanted outlets to write for. We couldn't find the right outlet, so we just thought, hey, let's make our own. Bought a WordPress for Dummies book, started a blog, ran it for 3 years while at Purdue. It was a really great experience, and then got the crazy idea to expand it to other people when we graduated and opened it up as a national platform, and we've been doing it ever since.
Nice, very nice. Amy O'Shea, how did you decide to start? Where did you grow up? How did you come to Purdue, and how did you decide to start Bright Books?
So again, my name's Amy, and I'm originally from Southern California, and I ended up at Purdue a little bit randomly. I get this question a lot. My siblings both went to school about 45 minutes away from where I grew up, and I'm being the youngest of three. I had to rebel and do my own thing, and ended up at Purdue. I had never been to Indiana, and I loved it right away. A lot of little things fell into place, and I got a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings walking around campus, and people who went out of their way to be nice to me and make me feel at home. So it was like an instant click for me, and made great friends and lifelong friendships. So I stayed. I was interested in engineering to start. I ultimately decided to go with political science. I was really interested in kind of how we can take this scientific approach and apply it to social problems, and how can we fix things that are happening in our society today. So after I graduated, I spent some time in Uganda. I was working at the Purdue Exponent at the time, and was covering an event with invisible children that was popular when I was on campus. So I became very interested in Ugandan politics and found myself drawn there. And during my time that summer living in this very rural part of the world, I was totally shocked by the fact that so many kids were coming in with upper respiratory infection and all sorts of health issues. And it turns out the result of that was from indoor air pollution, and it's from not having access to electricity. So I became very interested in energy access and helping to alleviate energy poverty and sustainable development. So this idea stuck with me for a number of years, and I finally decided to start my company, Bright Books, in effort to help alleviate energy poverty. So what we do is we sell journals, and for every pair that we sell, we donate a solar lantern to kids without access to electricity, and donate them to places like rural Uganda, and most recently Puerto Rico, post-disaster and all the hurricanes, some refugee camps, places where people don't have access to light switches like we do here.
Nice. And Ryan, what about you? Where did you grow up, and how did you find your way to Indiana, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, so originally I was from New York City, and I moved out here because the great schools and everything. And I went to Purdue. I studied political science, and I graduated in 2015. And I actually started OWL after I graduated. So this is about December, about Christmas break after my graduation. And the funny thing was I saw it on Facebook. I saw a lot of people got Fitbits for Christmas. And then one of my friends posted if you're a 90s kid, you grew up with Tamagotchi, Pokemon, Digimon, stuff like that. So I was thinking about merging the idea between Tamagotchi and Fitbit, because we feel like kids, they don't really connect with Fitbits, because that's mainly for adults. They check their calories, steps taken, stuff like that. So we want to have a gamified version of a Fitbit, and that's where the idea came for merging Tamagotchi and Fitbit together.
Nice. And Ryan, what's been the toughest thing about starting OWL?
Definitely. The toughest thing was we didn't have a lot of experience. There wasn't one specific route we take, because when we first started, right, we entered into the boiler competition, so that was in the spring of that year. And we had tons of mentors at the Purdue Foundry and other stuff, and they advised us to incorporate. And so we had to decide between incorporating to LLC, S corporation, or even an LLP. And so juggling between that and getting the logistics down was one of the critical things when we first started, because we had to get all the paperwork done, find the key people, organizing how the shares would be divvied up and stuff like that. So a lot of the logistics were the key components.
And how well do you think you did at that grade yourself?
I probably would still give myself a C, because I was a very slow learner. There were a lot of meetings with the lawyers and stuff like that, getting all the paperwork done. And then like what you said about the finance person, I totally agree with that. I'm fortunate enough to have a co-founder that is an expert in in the K1s and stuff like that. So we were able to get through that.
Yeah, nice. And Amy, why did you decide to do journals? I mean, I can guess because my mom was a lover of journals, but what made you decide to do journals, and were you hesitant at all to not just enjoy them yourself, but actually start creating them for other people?
A little bit. So I kind of reversed into it, to be honest with you. I wanted to do something with lights. So I was like, what rhymes with light? Okay, bright. And sort of stumbled into journals. We were talking before, and I've been a lifelong journaler. Like when I travel, I used to use them to take notes in class, and like I still use them to take notes at work. So to me, that like tangible kind of pen to paper thing is really important. It helps you remember things, helps you process things. If I've got a big decision to make, I'm like a pro-con list maker and need to like touch it, need to feel it on a piece of paper. And I think a lot of people nowadays are really craving that. Like I think people are wanting an escape from their screens and all the technology that we have available today. So I did a lot of research, and there's a huge market for journals. Like I'm not sure if you've seen Moleskin, they've got stores all over, and there's a huge market for paper goods now. So I think that there's a way we can do that, and not only produce journals, but produce them in a way that's sustainable and friendly to the environment. So making sure we're not producing in factories that employ children or, are like degrading the environment in the process. So that was super important to me, to make sure that we're creating a product that's useful and doing it well and sustainable.
What would be a breakthrough moment for you? And often Malcolm Gladwell wrote about the tipping point, and sometimes something's going along and all of a sudden there's a moment where something really starts to take off. What do you think could allow you guys to tip or to really kind of accelerate and take off?
That's a good question. I like to think of our success in terms of like number of lights that we're donating. So it would be really cool to get like this area where I started to get this covered in lights. That would just be so cool to me. And for those numbers to work, I think we'd have to end up in bigger stores. Right now we're in a bunch of small boutiques and an online shop. So to get into a store, maybe it's a Target, maybe it's like a Paper Source or something like that, like a larger scale chain, or some sort of like, national outlet. That would be amazing, and I think kind of put us over the edge.
Molly, I was interested to hear, I didn't realize you'd been with your co-founder as long as you guys have been working together.
Yeah.
And a lot of partnerships don't last that long. A lot of them struggle. Has it been an easy ride? Because it sounds like it's been 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, so actually, it's a funny story how we met. We met the second day of school freshman year at Purdue. And we say that this should be a Target ad because I was all hyped up on BGR stuff and was like, I gotta meet new people. So I saw this girl who was in a bunch of my classes, and she sat up front and always looked really cute, and I love fashion. And she was sitting by the Beerian fountain one day, and I walked up and just said, I think you're in a lot of my classes, and I like your blazer. And she said, thanks, it's from Target. And that was it. And, we were just friends our freshman year, really great friends. We ended up rooming together our sophomore year, and then, and we've always been the type of friends, even before we started our website together. We always say we're just two really dreamy people, and I think that's a really important thing. If you are a dreamy person, surround yourself with other people with ideas, and I'm sure a lot of you in this room have friends that you're always bouncing ideas off of each other. And we say too, we think of another business every single day we're together, but we just got to focus on one right now. But we were friends first, and then we both kind of saw the same need, and we both say that we're really happy we have a co-founder. I know there's some people that that doesn't work for them, and there's people that would rather go out and start something on their own, but I know for us, we've loved it because when things are really great, you've got a buddy to celebrate with, and when things are really bad, you've got someone else to lean on and who understands it, because no one fully understands what it's like to go through this except the other person who's right there next to you through it all. And I think, like you mentioned, Carlos, when one of you's down, one of you's up. And I think we've both been through, we started this when we were 20 years old, and now we're 27, and those are really pivotal, crazy years in your life, just personally. And so it's been really great to have someone who's also a friend who you can lean on in that sense. Yeah, so I know people are like, how are you guys friends? And we were roommates for about 5 years during that time, and we just had a really respectful relationship, and honesty was a #1 goal. And we said at any time, if you don't want to do this, you got to tell the other person. And I think it's really also important that we started it together at the same time, because I know sometimes co-founder conflicts happen because of someone feels they have more ownership of the idea than the other person, and we really truly owned the idea together.
How do you guys resolve something when you both feel really strongly about something, but you have very different points of view. Has that happened to you guys before? And if so, how do you guys resolve those moments?
That's happened a lot, and I think why our partnership is good is because we think differently, but then that also can cause butting heads on ideas. So we really respect each other and let each other each voice our full opinions. Don't interrupt each other, just say your piece and then I'll listen and then she'll say her piece. And so we really respect each other in that sense, and we've also surrounded ourselves with good mentors. So if there are ideas where we're kind of up in the air, we'll bring in a really smart third party, someone who's been there, someone who has a good business sense, and we'll bring other people into the conversation if we can't necessarily figure it out ourselves. And sometimes if one of us is just so passionate about it, the other one will be like, all right, there's something in you that really wants to do this, go do it. And it's never an I told you so if it doesn't work out. I think we both understand that sometimes you just have to get an idea out of your system, and the only way you can do it is to allow the other person a little bit of freedom to go off. And mistakes will happen and they'll be made, and you have to get through those.
Amy, how have you changed the most as an entrepreneur? When you think about the entrepreneur you are today versus when you started, what's the most interesting way in which you've changed as an entrepreneur?
That's a good question. One way that comes to mind immediately is I think I've become a lot more assertive. Like, my personality is a little bit more like, I am kind of laid back about things generally, and wouldn't necessarily like be the one to push super hard on something if unless I felt really strongly about it. So, but I have learned over the last couple of years, like, it's very important to like set expectations up front and focus on what you need to do and make those things happen. So I've become a lot more focused and learned to manage expectations, both my own expectations and of people that I'm working with. I use a lot of freelancers and rely heavily on partnerships with like NGOs to do these donations. And there's been a few times where things haven't gone according to plan or things changed last minute. And you need to be flexible on one hand and sort of roll with those things as they come. But on the other hand, you have to learn the times when if something didn't go according to plan, you need to make that person make it go back according to plan. Because if it's, like for example, in manufacturing, like I had a run that did not go as planned, and it was a lot of money on the line, and it was not exactly what was promised. So I pushed really hard and ultimately got what I wanted out of it. But that was completely against my nature and something that I had to really sort of teach myself and have others help in and step in and kind of advise and be mentors to you in those situations. So I'm very lucky to have some awesome mentors that have sort of been down this road before.
Who's one of the best?
One of them is one of my girlfriends from actually elementary school, and she works in fashion for a major designer, and she's helped me with the process, and they do a lot of their manufacturing abroad, so she was able to help me like understand the terms, some of the basic things that I had no idea what's going on. And she was the one who told me, like, if they tell you this is what's really happening, and like, no, you need to push harder, and this just means that they're being lazy, and you absolutely should get what you want here. My parents are also great mentors. My mom is very focused, and she'll always tell me like, okay, Amy, one thing at a time. When you get overwhelmed, you guys ever been there and you just don't know where to begin? You've got this giant to-do list. So she's also been a great mentor.
Ryan, what surprised you the most about being an entrepreneur?
I think the biggest thing is like, we all see like this rosy picture, you start to start up, it sounds great and everything. And then you gotta realize like, you guys have like small accomplishable goals, and then like those things can lead to like the bigger picture. So I think if you set your like small goals like here and there, especially like marketing and stuff like that, I think it really does add up. So like when we first did our first like major marketing campaign, we didn't have much funds for marketing. So we were thinking about like, how do we reach out to the community and abroad and stuff like that. So, like the first things we did was like, we reached out to like a lot of the Purdue clubs around here, and we decided to do like a fundraiser for like a 5K walk run to benefit the Boys and Girls Club of Lafayette. And so we partnered with the schools club, and then they organized like the track and stuff to be run on Purdue's campus. And then we decided to organize the event together, and then decide which dates and stuff like that to hold. And then it actually turned out to a very successful event. So I think you have small accomplishable goals that lead up to a big thing. Will always help. What
are you most proud of everything that you've done in the process of building OWL? What, for whatever reason, are you most proud of?
So I think the number one thing is probably like persistence, because like there were so many times like that like it failed so many times that I felt like if things were going right for a while, I would become paranoid that something is going to go wrong. And so like, even like when we first started like in the boiler competition, like one of our technical co-founders actually had quit. And so like we were scrambling to, find, our next tech co-founder and stuff like that. So I think persistence definitely is the #1 thing, so.
And Molly, what about you? How have you changed as a person and as an entrepreneur? I mean, you made the point that going from 20 to 27 is just a different life stage, so there's some change that's involved in that. But do you think you've meaningfully changed as an entrepreneur?
Oh, definitely. Just as a human being and an entrepreneur, I've just grown immensely, especially in the past few years. And especially as you hit bumps and rough patches, you learn so much about yourself. And one of the biggest things that I have learned and I think has been one of the most valuable lessons I've taken away is the importance of defining success for yourself and to not look at the world's definition. I live in New York City. I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs. It's amazing and it feeds you, but it also, I sometimes think it makes you make moves because you think you need to do them. And I think that's to your point of, sure, we'll take the $20 million because that, you feel it legitimizes you, or there's certain milestones you feel you have to hit to be successful, especially as a media company. For us, obviously growth is really important, but we didn't ever want to jeopardize our mission. We started our website because we didn't love the media landscape for young women at the time in 2010. So we started a site where we said, we're going to speak about young women positively. We're going to build you up. We're going to have real pictures of real women of all shapes and sizes and colors of skin, and we're not going to Photoshop them because representation is important in media. And people weren't really doing that at the time in 2010, so we were really ahead of the game just because we were the young women sitting in those seats saying, where are these people? Why does media only look this way? And so we were founded on a mission, and we never set out to be this giant, big media company, but we got to New York City, and we're working and being surrounded by all these people that were telling us, well, this is what you need to do to be this, to be the next BuzzFeed, to be the next Refinery 29, and we had to step back and say, do we actually want that? Do we want that as co-founders? Because we're chasing something now that we never even set out to do. And so we had to redefine success for ourselves. So sometimes that meant not taking a partnership because we actually did not believe in the product that we were advertising. And taking a hit, not taking money, that hurts your paycheck, that hurts your company. But we can go to bed every night and say that we've followed our gut, we've done what feels right, and so I think redefining success in that sense, and that might make it a harder path for you, but that's been a really valuable lesson. And also to not define yourself so much by what you do. I think it's more about a kind of person that you are. I got so attached, people called us the Lalas. So the Lala is our website, I don't even know if I said that, but our friends started calling us the Lalas. I'm like, oh, that's fun and cute, but I thought, I want to be Molly. I don't want to be the Lala. That's cool that I started this, and it's cool to be known by it. It's amazing to have a legacy, but I want to be known as me, and I want to be known as a good person, not just someone who started a big company. So that was also a really valuable lesson to learn.
Amy, if you were recommending a book or a podcast or a magazine article or some piece of advice to someone who's thinking about doing something entrepreneurial, what's the best thing you've come across, or what would you turn someone on to?
Oh, there's lots of awesome resources out there. One of the best when I was doing in the very early stages, so I did a crowdfunding campaign, and that's like launching a company overnight, essentially, if you use some of these platforms like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. And there's a ton of steps and lead up that go into that. And Tim Ferriss has a bunch of awesome blogs that were super helpful, and he gives you like a list of things to do step by step, from like develop a list of bloggers and people you should contact for media outreach and things like that. So I would say Tim Ferriss is super helpful for the startup piece of it. So many other podcasts. I'm a big fan of Pod Save America. I think they always do some great stuff, not really related to entrepreneurship, but that one's always kind of inspiring if you're needing some fuel to like make a change in the world. I think that's a great one. Yeah.
That's good. Ryan, what do you hope will be true 5 years from now? So we show up in 2023. Ryan Ma is, what do you hope will be true?
I hope the #1 thing is that we still stay true to ourselves. Since the first day we started, we stay true to our core mission and like what we believe in as a company and stuff like that. And I believe that's the #1 thing. And yeah.
Do you think you'll be doing this company still, the Owl?
Yeah, I really do hope so. But that concept has sort of changed a little bit, because it's like we still want to be in the forefront of technology and be able to help people in its way. So I think that core mission will dictate like the future products and stuff like that. So.
Amy, I'm going to start a wrap-up that goes Amy, Molly, and then I'll end with Ryan. Best piece of advice you've ever gotten anywhere at any point?
Oh man, well I've already revealed one of them, and that's my mother, Lori O'Shea. Yeah. She's so wise, and it's the one thing at a time. Yeah. I struggle with focusing. I'm just all over the place, like new ideas are in and out of my head every single day. So that one was really crucial. I think that one has definitely stuck with me a lot. Another one's a quote. I know it sounds very cheesy and idealistic, but it is honest to God, like true to my heart. And it's the most pressing and urgent question is not what you're doing for yourself, but it's what you're doing for others. And that's been like a major driving force. I have that on like my little bulletin board in my room. And I just think that, especially now, people are so interested in the give back movement in retail, and our generation is changing the world in so many cool ways. And I think it's amazing, and we should embrace that and embrace one another in that space. And be really thinking about how you can like sort of pursue your passions and your strengths and where that aligns with what the world needs today and how we can make a difference. And to me, that's like the greatest motivation of all, and kind of like an awesome quote to live by.
Yeah, Molly?
Yeah, one of the best pieces of advice my co-founder and I received, and this was right before we were getting ready to expand our business to make it a national thing and to move to New York City. And we talked to a fellow entrepreneur who he said, being an entrepreneur, you're gonna have some high highs and some low lows. And a really great piece of advice is try to stay as even-keeled during that as possible. And I think it's really important to feel emotions, but I'm definitely someone who gets overly upset about certain things that I shouldn't get that upset about, or also the idea of getting really excited about something that might not fully come to fruition, and then you're very let down when that doesn't happen. So to just try and stay even through all those things, because getting really high and getting really low can get you off track of what you're trying to do. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to have people to talk to through things, because I have found, and actually my parents, my mom has been a wonderful person to bounce things off of, and you know, just sharing something with someone else, they'll definitely put things into perspective for you, because they do. They're not right in the middle of it. They can tell you, hey, like it's just a business. You're all right. You're fine. Like don't get too up and down. So I really love that piece of advice, and that's kind of helped us when things seem really scary. It's helped us to stay even keeled and just focus on what we're there to do.
Nice. Ryan, bring us home. Best piece of advice.
So the best piece of advice was actually from one of my mentors at the Purdue Foundry. His name was Micah Sem, and he said, whatever idea you come up with, make sure you're able to conceptualize that idea in a napkin. So like whatever idea or invention you have, be able to make sure that you could draw on a napkin, and that like without explaining it with words or whatever, that other people can literally see what your business idea is. So I think that's one of the simplest forms of advice.
Simple and clean, almost like the elevator pitch, but even cleaner. Guys, big hand for Ryan, Amy, and Molly.
Thank you to all the participants for your advice and everything like that. And thank you to the audience for all your questions. We appreciate you joining us tonight for the Future of Work. We hope that you can join us now for a small reception in the Ringgold Gallery. And have a wonderful evening.